Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Power Motoryacht podcast. I'm your host, Editor-in-Chief, Dan Harding. Today, I have a conversation with friend and colleague, Senior Editor Chris Dixon. Kind of flip the mic a little bit and talk to him about what he and I usually talk about when not talking about work, and that's our personal boats. If you've been an astute reader of Power Motoryacht, you might remember that Chris got his son Fritz McKee center console for him to rebuild and fix up something they could work on together. And over the last few months, I've really enjoyed talking to Chris about this father and son project, what Chris has learned from the experience, what Fritz, his son, has learned from the experience, and what they've encountered really together. It's a fun story. It's certainly one that is close to my heart now with two boys and hopefully some future boat projects together in our future. So I really enjoyed this. I have to urge a little bit of caution before you're listening to this. This podcast does have the possibility of impromptu project boat purchases. It's I hear these stories from Chris, and I can't wait to get a small whaler or something to fix up with Connor and Caleb one day. So again, be warned. You might end up with a small boat in your driveway for your son or grandson. That's it. You've been warned. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Before we jump in, just want to give a quick word from our sponsor, Emtra. A quality windlass is the backbone of any anchoring system, and its reliable performance is crucial for any day boaters or long-distance cruisers alike. If you're looking to install a new windlass or upgrade your current anchoring system, Emtra's got everything you need. With premium windlasses from leading manufacturer LaFrance and Muir, Emtra offers every variation to meet your specific needs, whether you're looking for horizontal, vertical, electric, hydraulic, or manual windlasses. You can find them all at emtra.com. Let me just start with, why is the timing right now? Because you have a boat, you have a family boat in the Hydro Sports, and you have plenty of boats at your disposal. Why was the timing right? Him being 14, 15, for him to get a boat of his own.
He's always been really, like, I think any adventurous kid. You and I think we're probably the same way. I mean, for me, it was getting a go-kart, and then it was getting, my first surfboard. Oh, Lord have mercy. And then, eventually getting my granddad's 1977 Rinkin. And, you have these almost sort of like, I guess, milestones as a kid. He wanted to get one of those electric Razor motorcycles really badly a couple of years ago. And I said, well, okay, if you find one that's a good deal, we can split the cost on it, and, you can get it. He's just really, he will focus on wanting something and will really work hard to make it happen. And that includes, working odd jobs. And, so I've kind of been of the mind as a dad that, okay, if you're willing to work for this thing that you want, then I'm willing to help you out with it. And in the case of a boat, we really, he got fixated on getting a boat. And part of that is because we live on a peninsular neighborhood, literally, amidst a couple of tidal creeks, and he's got friends he's got a great little posse of friends who all have boats here. They almost live this life of pogues from the TV show The Outer Banks. Which is filmed right around the corner from where we live even. And the kids have grown up on the water. The parents, we all back and forth about getting quote unquote educated about being on the water. We all agreed that they should all go to a state DNR water safety class, boating safety class together. But the long short was, Fritz really, with his friends having boats, I felt like it could be, just a super good experience at that age. He has proven himself to have a good degree of situational awareness. As much as I would like, no, because he's a teenager, right?
Sure.
He's proven himself to be responsible in the water. I've watched him drive our Hydro Sports through for several years. We let him take it out for the first time with his friends last summer. Maybe that's later than some people would let their kids do. But our waters here we have our regular tides are 6 feet. We have a lot of current. We have a lot of obstacles, a lot of, there's a lot of hazards on the water here. So, it's not living on a lake. And I wanted, and my wife and I talked about, we wanted him and our daughter, for that matter, to have a good bit of experience before they branched out on their own. And I thought, when last summer was over, he really got the bug. I mean, he's just scanning Craigslist, Facebook, Marketplace, and looking at boats, and we talked about, we settled on this McKee. After he showed this one to me, it looked like it needed work, but it also seemed to have really solid bones. And McKee's, if folks are listening aren't aware, McKee is actually just relaunched in North Carolina after a long hiatus. But their 14 is pretty legendary, particularly here in the South. I mean, it's comparable. It's a tough as hell hull. It's foam filled. It's tough. It's heavy. It's very capable in wavy waters, and it won't sink, just like a whaler. And so they're also less expensive than whalers. I mean, because we gave ourselves a budget. Okay, dude, you're paying for half of this, and so you need to keep in mind, what are we paying? What are you willing to pay yourself? And then I also thought, as a kid, when I was 16, I got an old Monte Carlo, and my granddad helped me rebuild the motor in it, and I learned so much from that. And I also just was a teenage car fanatic, and so if he's really showing a lot of interest in boats, and it's my job, I feel like, as a parent, to not push him into it, but to sure as hell not turn him away from it. And so there's kind of this balance of like how much, and we also, I mean, there was a bit of, seeing my wife and I talking about it. Okay, let's see if this is going to pass. Let's see if this obsession with getting a boat is going to fade and is going to turn into obsession with something else. No, that's not what happened, And so I kept it a secret. The boat was in the backyard on Christmas morning, and he got to take a cruise. And we realized, when we got this boat from a guy locally here in Charleston, it had solid bones. I mean, we called it kind of the Millennium Falcon. Like, it didn't look like much, but it had it where it counts. And that was in the form of a well-functioning Evinrude 50. And like I said, a super solid hull. All the controls worked. He'd done a good bit of work to it already, but it was going to need, he knew he wanted it to look damn good, and to look damn good, that was going to be sanding it. That was going to be painting it. That was going to be painting the motor itself, and probably doing some work to the motor. So, that was kind of the baseline. Once he used the boat for about a week in the winter, we pulled it out, and he went to work on it, man. And again, it was I let him kind of take the lead. What do you want to do? What do you need help with?
Let's dive into that, because this is the part that I think is so interesting. It's the time was right. You got your son his first boat, and you were very careful in the choice of boat. So, but really, what I've always loved hearing about is your weekend adventures together, fixing this thing up. I mean, that's what I think is really special. A lot of kids have boats, but the fact that you guys really worked on this, truly, it sounds like you worked on it together. What was the first project? So you pulled the boat out. What was project number one for you two?
Project number one was taking everything off of it. Literally everything, down to the rub rail. Every component came off of that boat. We marked it. We put them in bags. We put them in containers. We labeled everything. We made a note of like, okay, these engine mount bolts and washers look a little rusty. We're probably going to replace these. And then, so first was taking the thing literally down to nothing. And then, with it on the trailer, Fritz then went to town, with the sander, respirator, because I, didn't want him breathing fiberglass dust. But I mean, we both spent a lot of time sanding it, but he sanded it, and then he would get his buddies to come over and help him sand it too. I mean, and they were stoked to do it. It was really cool. I mean, they would sit out there in the backyard, or the side yard rather, and buzzing away on the thing for hours. And we talked about, like, okay, you every imperfection is going to be seen. So, we need to do the sanding work, but then if there's places that need to be fiberglassed, and he knows a bit about working with fiberglass from surfboards already, but if there are things that need to be epoxied and clothed, we need to plan for that too. So the first thing was, yes, stripping the hell out of it. Yeah. And that, it took a long time, and I was a little worried, is he just going to get fed up and frustrated with us? No, he once he got started with it, he was pretty much on a mission, even in shitty weather.
Awesome. How long did it take? How long was he working on, kind of sanding and fairing before the paint began?
Yeah, we were probably doing that for, I'd say, a solid 2 months. Weekends, like you said, it was mostly weekends, but a lot of days he'd come home from school and want to, he'd blow off his steam by sanding the boat, and just, eyeballing those lines and making sure that it looked right. And we also, the hull had some water in the foam. And so we, down towards the back. So we also we cut a big hole in the back on the upper rear deck, and to evaporate the water out of the foam. And with the expectation that we were going to then eventually put a hatch over that so that we could open it up so that if it's a really hot summer's day, you can evaporate the water. And we learned a few things along that route too. Among them, any holes, you need to cover any screw holes that you're not going to reuse. You need to cover with epoxy, because if you're going to paint it, water, if there's any water left in the hull at all, it's going to push up through the paint and you're going to get bubbles. And fortunately we, nipped that in the bud, but it was one of those things I told him, look, any hole in this boat, even the tiniest little screw hole, you've got to fill it with epoxy. And he did.
Okay. And then you guys tackled the paint pretty quickly after. And I know I've seen the end result, looks amazing, but I seem to recall that was a project not without its challenges, and not one that's for the faint of heart.
No, it's not. And that was interesting too. I mean, we actually ended up using 3 different kinds of paint, and I'd never worked with 2-stage epoxy paint before. Yeah, I mean, I've worked with catalysts and resin since I was a teenager, but I'd never worked with it in a paint. And we'd never done rolling and tipping, which is where you take a super fine brush and run it along, and it gives if you do it right, it gives the appearance of a sprayed on paint job. And so we started with a 1 part, I want to say it was Axo Nobel paint for the inside. I can't remember the brand, but it was an Axo Nobel paint. And we just did, pure white on the inside. And nice. And part of that reason is because it gets, we were talking about, should we do a blue or a gray or something like that? No, it gets so hot here in the summer. And so that was a real consideration. You want the paint to be as reflective as possible. And then he wanted to take out the regular, just rotating boat seats that sit up on a post that it came with, and wanted to do a bench. And so we got a really nice 2x8 or 2x10, and then we used a beautiful seafoam 1 part paint, and it was reviewed as being really, really tough. And he made himself a bench. He made a mount for the bench so that he can slide the seat backwards and forwards if he wants to. He made the wooden mounts even angled, beveled them. He did a beautiful job. And then he and we decided, okay, here, we just, there was a lot of discussion. I mean, a lot of discussion. Okay, do we want to paint the whole hull, the entire hull, a two-part epoxy, or do we just want to paint the bottom? Because you're pulling boats out onto the beaches here and into the
Yeah.
mud and against oysters all the time. So we knew we wanted a two part paint, but we also wanted it to look really cool. So ultimately he, and I mean, it was again his decision, and his friends worked with him on this too. We painted a really beautiful, beautiful swath down the side, sea foam, and then we flipped the boat over, and that was an adventure. Getting it off the trailer. I'd never done that before. Hooked it to a post on one side, and then pulled the trailer forward and let the boat slide off, and that was nerve-wracking as hell. And
Yeah.
then the boat was really heavy, and so like four of us, very carefully flipped it over and did the base. And I helped Fritz mix up the epoxy paint, but it was all new to me
Wow.
too.
Yeah,
We hadn't
yeah.
done it before, and it turned out thankfully really well. you know.
And now, just a quick word from our sponsor. Imtra is a 100% employee owned company committed to bringing best in class products, expert product knowledge, and unparalleled support to the entire marine industry throughout North America since 1952. So that's that's really great background. I guess what I want to talk about is get a little into the philosophy and like how you managed this father and son project. So now, now we're
hmm
getting into the project where you're months into it, and for all intents and purposes, Fritz sounds like a really focused on this project, a go-getter. But I got to imagine he's a teenage boy, and what do you? I guess, do you have any advice, or what did you learn about throughout the process of working with your son that made it successful? If that makes sense.
There's a few things, for sure. One, I think redoing a boat with your kid, if you have the time and the bandwidth, it's great on so many levels, because your kid's going to learn so many things literally by osmosis. And but there were a lot of frustrations too, and among them were, okay, we mix up a we mixed up mixed up a batch of paint, and then the wind came up and it blew dust all into it. And Fritz was just, we were both just so pissed and frustrated, but he was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like so far along, at that point.
yeah.
And there were also frustrations with, he wanted to be done. I think it was more work than he expected. And we even had talked about this beforehand. At what level of a fix up do you as a parent and you as a kid actually want to pursue, and are you willing to pursue? Do you want to rebuild a motor? That's a whole other freaking level. And this boat, the hull was in pretty good shape. It just needed some repairs. We didn't have to yank out the transom and put a new transom in it. So
Right.
you really need to think about your time frame on this. We wanted to have it done so you could use it for the summer. So um that was a consideration. But by and large, some of it was also me just talking him off the cliff sometimes, when he'd spend a couple of hours, and the dude who owned the boat before had put some really thick, nasty epoxy on the hull, and it took forever, to sand it off and get it looking right. And I was like, dude, it's going to ultimately, you're going to be really glad you did this. And then it came down to when and then there were unexpected obstacles too. And I think you really have to not, you can't plan for unexpected obstacles, but you have to lay out to your kid ahead of time. Well, if we pull this transom off and the hull turns out to be full of water, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to keep this boat? We need to be prepared for potentially serious disappointments, along the way. I mean, an old boat is an old boat. And so, and then like I said, there were unexpected obstacles. For example, when we went to put the controls back on, and because of the way that the we had set up the bench, the controls hit the bench. And so we had to fabricate out of wood a piece to push the throttle out away from the side of the boat so that it didn't interfere with the mount for the bench. And so we're like so ready, I mean, we're just like, oh man, we're gonna have this boat in the water tomorrow, and then we put the throttle controls back in the same hole, and it doesn't work. And Fritz is just like, oh my God, and
Yeah.
and so it was like, okay, dude, we're gonna get around this, but again, then it's gonna take a while. You've got to go and spend a couple of hours. You can't just cut a 2x4 and put it there. You've got to paint it. It's got to be waterproof itself. You want a good quality piece of wood to do that. You can't, I told him, you can't half-ass this job, because you're gonna ultimately regret it. And so, and then we can get into this, as we get towards the end. There's been significant frustrations with the engine, so it's still, it's an ongoing thing, but it's also life, right? I mean, life puts obstacles in front of you, and you got to overcome them, and if you do, you're better for it.
Well said. There's another lesson that we talked about well over a month ago that you shared that really stuck with me. And it was, you guys were in the throes of the project. I think the boat was painted at this point, and yeah, you guys were both chomping at the bit to get it done, I guess. But it was like you had a very interesting way of managing the project and managing the time of it. So I remember it was like one day you were working on the boat, but Fritz, he wanted to take off and go surf, and it was like,
Right.
you encourage that. So you really, I think you like came to a point in the project where you said, like, I know how you're wired, and you'd be like, we're gonna work on this every available minute till it's done.
Mm-hmm.
But you had the patience and the wherewithal to say, step back and be like, you know what? It's not gonna be, this is his boat, this is his project, and I'm here to help. And that's got to be hard to balance, I think, sometimes for someone like you who's done all, projects.
Well, I think that really, it's a really important point, Dan, and it also speaks to, I think, our listeners, a lot of whom are high achievers and who want and who want to get shit done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's his boat. It's his pace, and Fritz, I'll use, yeah, there were times that he was just done, and I didn't want, I didn't want to do this project for him, for one thing, because I think a lot of dads would, I think in some cases a dad would just be like, oh shit, I'm just gonna go ahead and finish, laying up this paint or whatever. No, I wanted him to be, if he wanted to work on it, I'm happy to, spend as much time as he wants, but we need to work on it together. If there's a good swell and he wants to go catch some waves, go catch some waves. Maybe I'll go with you. Maybe I've got too much to do, but go catch some waves. And I liken it to, it's funny because I'm going to brag on Fritz. He's a really good surfer, really good, and he has been competing up until this year. And this year, he decided he didn't want to compete anymore. And part of me was like, well, I want my son to excel. I want my son to compete or whatever. But he's been doing it, and he prefers to surf for the pure enjoyment of it, and I hope that he will boat and fish for the pure enjoyment of that as well. So there's a balance there. I mean, I'm not going. My wife and I we said, are you sure you don't want to compete surfing? Yeah, he thought about it a lot, and so I had to respect that. I think, especially as your kids get older and they're forming their own opinions, their own work habits, their own ways of getting things done. He's not a carbon copy of me. We're a lot alike in a lot of ways, but he's not a carbon copy of me. And the last thing I want him to do is to get turned off on the things that the things that drive him. I mean, he draws boats incessantly, and it draws them really, really well. And so I don't the last and I could see him, designing boats for somebody at some point in his life. So is my way to encourage that by cracking the whip to get him to finish his boat. No, but it's a balancing act, and you'll see it as your kid gets older too. It's like, where do you and what if he had just decided to leave the damn boat and not finish it? I mean,
I guess there's the balance, right? Because you'd have to nudge him, right? Like, I mean, but you got skin in the game, but at the same time, it's a balance, right?
Yeah, totally. And we were talking yesterday. We went for a surf yesterday, and we're driving back from the beach, and the weather was just beautiful. It was really calm and beautiful sunset. He's like, God, I wish I was out on my boat right now. And he can't be, because the 1996 Evinrude 50 that we have on it has started to give us a lot of trouble, a lot of headache. That it ran perfectly when we got it, and we've done a lot of work to it since. And he has learned a lot. He and I have replaced the fuel pump. We've replaced the coil pack. We've cleaned all the contact points for the trim and tilt. We've done and there's more, but we've done a lot to this motor. Yeah. And so we're now kind of to the point of, again, there's this dad thing. Okay. I think it's so cool that he's driving a boat that has a bitchin' old 2-stroke motor that he painted. He made it look so good. He picked out his Johnson sticker for it. But at what point does that become? This is what Fritz and I are wrestling with now. Like, at what point does this become a liability? Right. Particularly because we live in really current torn waters. We have violent afternoon thunderstorms here. The last thing I want is for him to be out with his buddies. So we're talking about an engine investment, as much as the person who loves working on vintage equipment in me. I have an old Cadillac myself, and I have an old boat, I love keeping old stuff running, but there's a safety and I mean, it's frustrating too. He's out there running with his friends, and the motor starts bogging out, then they have to tow him back to the house. Well, that sucks. I mean, that's life, but it also sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a new motor might be on the horizon.
I think you've done it the right way. And I totally get what you're saying, but I think there's such an important lesson here in the choice of boat that you gave him to start out with. It was a boat that you could do all those things with. So he learned so much. You can learn so much from an older outboard motor that you can't touch today. Totally. I mean, it's just that it's not designed for it. And I guess I would maybe this is a lesson to encourage readers that are, thinking about, they're getting their kids their first boat, or grandkids, the first boat for the kids. It's like, I think there's a real lesson. My first boat was a very simple old sailboat, and I'm so thankful for that. It was like,
totally,
it's no systems, right? So it's I think you were super smart in your choice, but I also see that dad perspective of the reliability factor. You don't need him stuck out there.
It's to your point though. Like, so we floated it. We worked on it, and we floated it a couple of times, and it still wasn't running right. And we put the trolling motor on it so that he could get it back to the ramp, Smart. If he needed to. And so sure enough, we floated it. This was a few weeks ago, and it died on him. And I'm out there at the ramp watching him, and a dad was there teaching his son to drive their skiff. It was a 17 with a brand new Yamaha on it. It was a nice boat. Or no, it was a brand new Mercury. It was a nice boat. And he's like, "You want me to go get him?" So I'm like, "Sure, yeah." So he has his son drive out to Fritz, rather than Fritz having to, go against the current with the trolling motor and get to me in, 5 minutes. He throws him a rope, comes in, and he's like, "Man, that's the dad said to Fritz, he's like, man, that is just a beautiful boat. He said, you should be so proud of yourself for, for doing that. And Fritz does not like to call attention to himself, but he
You like
made him
that?
feel good.
Yeah,
And
of course.
he said, so what's wrong with the motor? And we're like, I don't know. And he's like, well, at least you can work on that motor. He's like, this thing, I don't,
Exactly.
if it breaks down, I have to take it to the mechanic no matter what. And I'm like, that's the trade-off right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're wrestling with.
Yeah, no, it's really great stuff, and he should be especially proud. I think, you should be especially proud. It's cool that you guys, tackle this together. I think it's something that I know you appreciate it now, but I gotta think, yeah, that in the years ahead, you're really gonna look back on this stretch, and even the
Yeah.
and even the frustration on your worst day with that Evinrude, you're gonna look back and kind of wish you were back there working on a
Mhm.
boat with him. I just have loved following the story. Last question I think for today is and you touched on so much of this already, but
Mhm.
any other advice for fathers that are contemplating something similar with their sons, or maybe you're just sparking an idea?
Mhm.
Is this something you would encourage? And yeah, what advice might you have?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing would be have realistic expectations, and realistic goals.
Yeah.
Don't if you want to undertake a project like this with your kid, don't plan more than you think you can do, because even if you plan a little bit less, you're probably going to be at the point where that's probably going to be your sweet spot point. You know what I mean? Because you're going to have curveballs thrown at you. Second, I would say, if this is going to be your kid's boat, let the kid drive the project. Don't drive your kid. I mean, the kids have enough freaking pressure in their lives and in their worlds today. Let this be a release and not a stress. Let this be a release from stress. Let this be I mean, there were days that, he was down there sanding that thing. I could just tell he's in a total Zen state, right? He's focusing
Yeah.
on it, so heavily. And the other is, think of how much you're going to spend, I mean, and how much you want your kid to spend. Do you want your kid to spend all the money? Are you willing to pay for everything if the kid does, their fair share of the work? Do you want the kid to pay their share? And then also, so you really need to have, and also, of course, it's a boat, it's going to cost more than you think it is. What happens when your kid runs out of money on the project? Are you going to chip in a bit? Or are you going to require them to go and wait tables, or in our case, teach surf lessons to make up for it? So the biggest takeaway, that I've gotten from this is, one, it's been really rewarding, but two, let the kid drive the project.
Love that.
Don't let this be the kid's project, and you be the facilitator.
No, I love that. That's something I hope I file that one away as a lesson for myself in the future. I also love your approach to having your son put skin into the game.
Mm-hmm.
With this boat, being candid, you could have bought this boat for him.
Yep.
He didn't ask for the new Azimuth 72.
No, it was not an expensive boat.
But I think it was is like, how bad, show me you want this, be willing to put something into it. And I'm sure you did that as a lesson, not because you couldn't buy it for him or you didn't want him to have it, but it was like, don't you care so much more about things? Don't you understand the value of something when you can equate it with, I had to teach 20, you think 20 bratty kids surf lessons,
Mm-hmm.
just, to pay for the paint
and I mean, he
or
comes
whatever.
home from work some days, he's so exhausted, when the current's just sweeping down the beach. You think, oh, it's teaching surfing, how great. Teaching surfing here in the summer when the wind's honking 20 knots out of the south ain't easy. So yeah, to your point, that's a really important point.
Yeah, you value it more when you got when you've had to work for it. And I know that boat's been a labor of love, and I look forward to, I'm sure I'm sure we have all the outboard manufacturers are listening to this. Mercury, Yamaha, go ahead and give Chris and Fritz a call. A nice 200 mark on that would
Yeah, we'll just drop a nice
he'd,
200 on it.
he'd be the king of Charleston. So now
For sure.
Chris, thank you for sharing this the story. I love hearing these stories personally, but if you enjoyed this, you're gonna be doing an upcoming story in a future issue of Power Motoryacht that kind of goes a little deeper and examines different other aspects of what's been a really remarkable father and son story. And if you don't already subscribe, head on over to pmwhiteMag.com/subscribe. Make sure you don't miss that issue. And Chris, I really appreciate it, man. I hope you and Fritz get out on the water.
I think that's the plan after we end this call, actually. So I appreciate it, Dan, and we appreciate everybody listening to our pods, and we hope we're throwing something out there worthwhile to everybody.
Absolutely. All right, thanks, Chris. I'll see you on the water, man.
All right,
later.
And now, just a closing word from our sponsor. If you're in need of a windlass, handheld remote, chain counter, chain stopper, anchor swivel, prefabricated or custom spliced anchor rod, or electrical components like solenoid control boxes and circuit breakers, IMTRA, they have it all. IMTRA has a team of experts dedicated to helping you find the perfect product for your boat, including offering maintenance kits and troubleshooting advice to keep your anchor system running smoothly for years. Visit IMTRA.com or give them a call for answers to all your anchoring questions.